Hey, Slick Talkers, thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. And I know that if you love this show, you'll also love my morning show called Good Morning Hospitality with my co hosts Michael Golden and Brandy Canali, as we spend 30 minutes every Monday morning to dive into the industry's top latest news and trending topics. So go check it out on wherever you find your podcasts at Good Morning Hospitality. And you can live stream with us on Monday mornings on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode.
It felt like a personal project now. It became like, how do I recreate something that our family went to and that I want people to have that exact experience. So it became like a bit of a selfish creative endeavor, but it seems like people enjoy it. So we get a lot of comments about like, oh my God, the attention to detail. And they also talk about like how they too had that experience growing up. Like it's so nice to see that that
Amazing.
was translated through like our vision.
You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. Welcome back to the podcast. I would love to introduce you to Vintory and Safely. About Vintory, we've had Brooke Fotz on the podcast, who is a founder, multiple times, and him and his team know numbers. They know data and they know marketing. They know how to help property managers just like you scale and grow their business by adding more inventory, aka more homes, into your rental program that drive the bottom line. For all of you listeners that want to learn how to scale and grow your inventory, you can get a free digital copy of Brooke's book called From Zero to 500 Properties in 5 Years. And for an added bonus, if you would do a demo of the Vintory platform, you'll get a $50 gift card to Amazon. Now that's a sick deal. And now to touch on our friends at Safely.com. Safely.com helps property managers just like you and I protecting the homes that they manage from structural damage to content damage and of course bodily injury. This means plates, linens, cups, couches, tables, curtains, walls, and of course your guests themselves are protected. And this helps you by scaling your company in order to ensure that you are retaining owners and inventory in your program. If anything is broken or if anyone is hurt, you are able to make a claim through Safely, and within 3 business days, you can get instantly paid out to replace any items and settle any claims that happen on site without having to deduct from your owner's payouts. That's why I call these guys the dynamic sponsor duo. And thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Check out their offers in the show notes, and back to the episode. All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. And I am joined by this power couple out in Quebec, Canada. We got Frankie and Julia joining us today. They are the owners of the Happy Camper Chalet. And I have to say, this is a new episode for me because, as all of you listeners know, we usually go into either tech founders or other big property management companies. But when I saw Julia and Frankie's listing on Instagram, I was captivated immediately. I was like, wow, this is like really done well. They've really made a destination. They put a lot of attention to detail and made me want to reach out and just be like, hey, are you guys interested in doing a podcast? So love to tell your story. And here we are. So welcome to the show, you two. How are we doing?
Hi, Will. Thanks for this really beautiful introduction. I feel like we can't even follow this. But we will do our best to follow this great introduction as best as we can. So, I'm Julia,
I'm Frankie.
and we've been together for almost 12 years, actually. We're not married, but we've been together for 12 years. And yeah, should I get into the story?
Yeah, I want to know. Let's actually back up before you dive into the Happy Camper Chalet. How did you guys meet? And let's talk about like building up into the purchase of the property. What made you get into short-term rentals? Because obviously, I think your guys' love story probably has something to do with it. I'm just
It does,
guessing.
actually. It does.
Okay.
So about 12 years ago, we met in class, And in the corner of my eye, I saw this beautiful girl. I was like, oh, she's cute. She's everything that I want. But then all of a sudden, I found out that she's dating someone else. So I waited a bit of time. Yeah,
A couple months.
a couple months. Then she broke up with the guy, and then I was just like, "Oh, hey, let's do something." And then I didn't know, but she was stalking me behind closed doors.
Because I was also interested. I had broken up with someone, and then I was interested in him, but I thought he wasn't interested in me. It's one of those, like, goose chase
Yeah.
stories where it's like, I'm into him, but he wasn't free. He was into me. I wasn't free. So after, like, I think 2 years or something, finally, we were both available, both really interested in each other, and we're like, "Let's give it a shot." And yeah,
Okay,
12 years later, here we
and
are.
it was love.
It was love. Yeah. Yeah.
It just took 2 years. It was the right person, wrong time, maybe?
Yeah, and I think we both knew we wanted each other from the beginning, and ironically, we had gone to elementary school together as well, just in different
Oh, wow.
grades. So we both knew we really, really were attracted to each other, but we just it was just never a good time to get into the relationship. So we waited a really long time, and it just ended up working out. So yeah, and then actually, so to bring it back to the chalets and the short-term rentals, early on in our relationship, we would go up north together, and that was the best time of our relationship. Like going away to this beautiful cabin with our friends, and we would just like our relationship really flourished in chalets. We would always dream up, like we would stay in bed and just think like, how could we ever get a chalet? And this was like 11 years ago. We never even thought it was possible. But we kept dreaming of like, oh, one day when we retire, maybe we can do that. But like never thinking like it would be an Airbnb. Like we were thinking this was something that we'd own, just we'd go up on the weekends and we'd own, but we wouldn't rent out. So it was always a dream from the very beginning, from the first year of dating. It was something that always was a conversation, a part of our lives, and always part of our dreams, but we never knew how it would happen. So that's actually an important part of it, our story.
No, I love it. And I'm curious to know from the dream phase of imagining getting to this point and having the chalet for yourselves, what were the best memories or moments that you guys had that really impacted you as you're starting to create your own? Like, what were the things you guys would reflect back on and be like, remember that one time when we did this or this and that happened? And we should be able to like have that at the property. I'm sure there's got to be some good stories there for you. I wanna hear one from each of you actually, by the way. So, Frankie, don't think you're gonna get away from, uh
I'll
Yeah,
start.
okay. I'm a sucker for a jacuzzi.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
like, yeah, and like Julia's not. So like every single time, like I would show up to a place with friends, like I'd be the first one with like the towel in my hand and be like super excited to like
Mhm.
jump in. Most of the times I was by myself anyways, because didn't want to get wet, especially in Canada where it's like -20 outside. So I'd be like in the tub by myself. So it was just like, oh, this would be such a dream to actually like have my own chalet, go up north. So now I catch myself just like going for like little spa days on my own with the Happy Camper Chalet. So I think that was like the biggest feature.
Yeah, you really do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm a bit of a pampered princess when it comes down to those things.
Hey, I am the same way, I'm not even kidding. Once a month, I'm like, "I have to have a spa day." Or not once a month, once a quarter, but still, gotta do it.
Exactly.
Got it.
Little will time.
Yeah, oh, exactly, exactly. What about you, Julia? I'm curious to know, like, what was the big, "Man, remember when we had this happen," or something like that along the way?
I wouldn't say there's like a specific moment, but well, I personally love like being in this like the fantasy of being in this old cabin that's been through passed on through generations, and like I have a coffee and I'm looking at the window and it's cold outside. Like it's just that fantasy of like being like
Coziness?
warm.
Like, cozy? Just like a feeling of
Yeah,
being
the coziness and, like, I don't know, just the feeling of being in a warm place and knowing that it's cold outside because 'cause we're here in Quebec, so it's cold for the majority of the year. So, that was always really appealing, and I really love design and home design in general, so I would always imagine, like, how I would make this cabin look the way I envisioned it, you know? It was not I didn't ever think of having, like, a maybe a generic cabin, but it was like, how do you add, like, those really adorable elements that make you feel like nostalgia and vintage elements that make you feel like this was passed on through generations and it was like a grandfather or grandmother cabin, you know? Like I love that feeling of something being etched into your history. I love that. So whenever we go to these really old cabins, I would just like my mind would be like processing all these potential ideas of how we can have that. But again, we never thought it was possible until this past year.
That's awesome. And I'm curious to know before we jump into the purchase and going into it, actually make the dream come true. What was your guys' career path? Because I think you and I, well, yeah, the three of us, when we had your pre chat, I kind of questioned or commented in the sense of like, man, the attention to detail you guys have in this chalet is actually something of someone who's been in the hospitality industry, not just, oh, I'm going to start my own chalet. And like, you guys have really good attention to detail, so I'm curious, like, what was the career paths that you guys had before getting into doing this?
Well, we're really happy that you noticed that because we noticed it ourselves, but we're like, maybe the rest of the world don't realize like the details that we put in, but it's so refreshing to hear that. So thank you for that compliment. So in terms of let's say my career path, I have a party business called Funkist and I'm a designer. I design party supplies for a living and I've been doing it for about 6 years full time. So yeah, I design the party supplies. I ship them to the majority to the States, about 90%. And throughout these 6 years of really working on my business, making it grow, I've learned so many things about how to sell online, how to take a product and portray it in an attractive way online. Like those were things I had to learn just by trial and error. They like originally when I would advertise my products for my business, I would just put like my product on a white background, which is important for one of the photos, but I find my business really took off the minute I started taking photographs of the products set up in an actual venue with children there, with parents there, like to set the scene for, I want people to visualize themselves in that party in the party frame. So all this to say is that my business helped us really understand what it's like to sell online products. And we kind of took a lot of the lessons that I've learned and applied that to our chalet. So that's what I do. Do you want to talk about what you do?
What I do currently, we also have backgrounds in psychology.
Oh yeah,
We both
that's
have
Okay.
degrees in psychology as well, which also gives us to like the idea of like how people are going to interpret everything going forward. But like my background has been like pretty much like a little bit scattered, but always kind of like in a hospitality service à la clientèle, client service. So it's been kind of like I was a cook slash chef, then a waiter. Then after that, I started selling cars. Now I'm in finance management. So I think where we kind of complement each other is that Julia is more creative, but then like on the back end, like I'm all the
hospitality.
hospitality and like the list and the numbers and like looking to see what cash flow, what kind of revenue we're making and like exactly how everything's coming out
Yeah.
overall. And I think we kind of complement each other because like we're able to get the nightly rate that we need to and also have a great looking ad as well.
Yeah, like I'd say where our careers both complement each other is that like I'll take care of the creatives, the marketing, public relations in general. And then Frankie's the hospitality, which I have to congratulate him. He is like the best person you want to message if you're staying at an Airbnb. Like he's on top of it. Like let's say if that was up to me, I could see myself like letting go a bit or saying like, "Oh, wait another hour." Like Frankie's on top of it. Even if we're out with friends, he's immediately responding to, and sometimes I'm like, "Why are you're so on top of it?" Sometimes like you can just relax a little, let it go a couple minutes and he says his reply and I love it is imagine that was our vacation. Like
Mm.
we want our replies like immediately. Like imagine if there's an issue with the hot tub, like you don't want to wait another hour to figure out if that's going to work because sometimes the moment passes. So he's so on top of making sure the guest experience is optimal. And honestly, he's like that in our relationship. He's like that with friends. He's like that through work. Like that's one quality that I find follows you throughout is you're really like attentive to people's needs and people's like creating like an optimal guest experience and even in our home even the day-to-day living it's like he's trying to like he folds towels in a certain way and like the coffee is presented with like sometimes he'll bring me a coffee and it's cut up with like slivers of chocolate on top, and I feel like I'm like at this five-star hotel. So I think as my partner, like Frankie, I'm so grateful to have him. He delivers on guest experience 100%.
Thank you. That was
Yeah.
really nice. Wait,
He's over here like, dang, all right, gotta get on
yeah, oh my
podcasts more often.
Yeah.
I like all this praise. It's amazing.
No, it's really cool, and, like, I love that you guys do have a complementary balance of each other, and,
Yeah.
I was actually as I was going through your guys' listing, I was noticing all the photos do have, like, kids in it, or it's you guys, and it's like, it's not just a real estate photographer came in and did real estate photos, it was a lifestyle where anyone, including a guest, would imagine themselves already there. They would be like, "Dang, I'm already on vacation even though I'm looking to book in May or April or wherever," and being like, "All right, yeah, look, we gotta like, we have to execute on it because we already see ourselves there." So that's always, like, a really cool tie-in on, like, how you've used your business, Julia, and then, of course, Frankie, with your experience on just being able to, like I love that you say, "What if this was our vacation? What if this was I" that's such a good mindset to look at it. So, yeah, I just wanna congratulate you both. It's really impressive, and going into your guys' listing, I did see not only the hot tub, but the sauna. So, what
Yeah.
made you guys go let's before we I'm already jumping way too ahead. I get too excited. So I wanna say going from the ideation and the dream of having your own chalet, taking your experience with vision and marketing, and then, of course, the guest experience and the communication, the numbers, all that stuff. When did this opportunity present itself to you guys to actually execute on this idea/dream?
So we actually had a friend in the family. We were at some random dinner, a family dinner, and we were just talking back and forth. And we had one of my family friends is a real estate agent, but I don't see him often. It was just he casually came over, had a quick bite, and we were just talking about our dream as we always do. We just put it out there. We said, "Oh, it'd be so great. We always imagine having a chalet, maybe like when we're 50. This is something that we could do." And he's like, "I think you guys can actually do it though." And we said no, like now is we're definitely like we're still like back then we were in our 20s, like we're still pretty young. Like I don't see us affording that now. And he said, "Well, you don't necessarily have to afford it in terms of like paying like monthly." And then he presented the idea of short-term rentals. And then at first it sounded a bit ridiculous. Like I said, okay, yeah, like that's nice, but not for us and not for now? But then I think we just went home and we got thinking about it and we decided to just do some like fun research. Like, let's just go online and look up some listings and see if there's anything within our range. And then from that point, I feel like it just snowballed. Like it was just every day I would check it casually. Frankie would check. And then it just became, it started off, let's say, like 30 minutes a day. And then it was going into like 3 hours. Like, let's say during my lunch break, I would take like extra time off just because I was so excited. Like, it actually felt in reach finally. It felt like something that was actually doable for the first time in the past 11 years.
It kind of became like an addiction. Just to give like an idea of the timeline, like the meal that we had with the Magic Man was December 2021. Then it pretty much like incepted in our heads, and like 2 3 months going in, we just kept on looking up stuff and looking up like how to do it, and like all of our podcasts, everything that we were looking up. It wasn't just like, oh, look at this property. It was like we were listening to Rob Built a lot,
Yeah.
Big Pockets podcasts. Like at this point, like I went to bed and I dreamt about it.
Yeah.
Woke up, just did everything. Like my actual job was just like a part-time thing.
It's true. Our jobs, we were so tired going to our jobs because we would, let's say, go to bed and watch these videos on short-term rentals, and we would be exhausted the next morning.
And it just seemed like this, like something just kind of clicked for me, myself personally. Something like clicked. I was like, my God, this is the future. It's so nice. And then after that, we started visiting properties. And as I'm sure you may already know, the beginning of 2022, there was not exactly the easiest time to procure anything. So we
Mhm.
visited a few of them, had our hearts broken a few times. But then we visited this one, and one thing led to another, and we were actually able to close. We closed early 2022.
Wow.
which is great.
So you've been almost have you hit the full year mark of owning it, or
Yeah.
are you guys getting just there?
We're 8 to 9 months in now.
Okay.
Yeah, we're 8 months in. So we're still new at this, but we both feel like we've been doing this forever. And maybe it's because it's been part of our dreams for so long, or maybe that we're so intensely into it. But it's just like such an exciting process. Like we genuinely enjoy it. And I feel like a big distinction that we always make is some people will come to us and say, like, oh, it's so cool that you're in the real estate world. And we never feel like we're in the real estate world. Like this doesn't feel like we're making a move like, oh, it's a financial investment, even though it is. But this is
Yeah.
not the primary move for us. Like we're always seeing this as like a really fun creative project mixed with like our passions, like my love for creativity and his love for hospitality. Like it actually like we're not thinking about numbers all the time. Like of course we have to know our numbers,
Yeah.
but we're really driven by just the excitement. Like we can't believe that we get to do this and fully execute whatever comes to mind. Like this feels so legitimate business. It's so cool. It's really interesting. So we are super passionate about it. And yes, the real estate and the investment part, it's a huge part of it. But like what the driving force, as I was saying before, is always like the experience for guests. Like that's what really excites us the most and what keeps us going, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious to know, do you know Natalie Palmer with No Vacancy, the podcast? She's
I've heard of it too, but I happen
okay.
to.
Well, she's awesome, but we had a conversation a while ago going into like the host quadrant, right? So it's like host number 1 is all about the numbers, only wants it to be a financial piece in their life and wants to be completely hands off. They don't want to they just want to see good revenue
Mhm.
and that's it. And host number 2 was more of like a lifestyle host where it's like they care about the numbers, obviously. The numbers are important, but it's more about giving them or that person a lifestyle and the ability to use it themselves and to create memories with their family and to, do all the different things that aren't just tied to a financial decision. There's like number 3, where it's the hands on, you're all in for the creativity. You don't care if you give away the property for $5 a night. You just want to host people and be all in for the hospitality and all this other stuff. So it sounds to me, you guys are in the quadrant 2. Obviously, numbers are important. It's a financial decision on your guys' end, but at the end of the day, it's really for yourselves, not only the guests, but you're able to then use it, create memories, and like you said, I think Julia, you said in the beginning of the episode was, you know, some of the best days in your guys' relationship were at chalets. So being able to carry on those best days as you continue to have your own is super important and really a core value in some kind of way for your guys' relationship. It's what it sounds like. I could just be making a guess.
No, it's 100% true, and I love this quadrant analogy, and I'm actually curious about you. Do you feel like you've hit the 3rd quadrant? Like, where do you see yourself? Just out of curiosity. I'm trying to flip the
Oh,
podcast
yeah.
a little here.
I know. Put on your own podcaster hat here for a second.
I'm just curious, though. You don't have to go too
No,
long like that.
no, it's good. I don't own any properties, so we have a management company where it's just management agreements. So we have about 10 homes. And for me, it's more of the like you guys, I think the hospitality experience, creating a brand, creating consistency across short-term rentals because I came from the hotel world. So going
Right.
through Marriott and everything, you have the standard linen across all properties, every room type. You have the communication, the way you talk to guests, the words like my pleasure, yes, sir, no, ma'am, whatever it might be. For me, that's where I get excited, anticipating guest needs. And so with our 10 homes, we really focus on like standardizing, even though it's really hard to do with a bunch of different homes in different states, but creating that recreation rentals consistency basically is what really excites me. So I think I'm in quadrant 2 because I would love to use our properties. They're all properties that I would love to be at, go on vacation with, or bring friends to. So yeah, definitely quadrant 2. Eventually I'll buy, but right now, a little on the horizon, not too worried about it.
Sure. And I love that you came from the hotel world because I feel like once you start off in an industry that focuses on like the perfect guest experience, like there's no going back. Like that becomes part of your it's just like I find you too, like in the chef world, like I feel like when we're
Yeah,
cooking, I feel like I'm working with someone who worked in restaurants. Like if he's like
yeah,
he'll use restaurant terms. Like what's the thing when you say like you're in back? like with the
Yeah,
knife
okay.
or
Like I'm just like behind. I was like,
yeah,
Yeah,
behind. Like he'll use
behind,
this
behind.
terminology.
behind.
He'll use this restaurant terminology and that never leaves him. And I feel like, let's say for you too, in the hotel world, like I'm sure you could never fold a linen ever again in the way you used to before. Like you've just learned new ways.
No. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty much burned into your brain after a while, especially, like, the My Pleasure. Like, I remember going through, like, the training through Marriott and an orientation for the property, and just even being out with my friends at the bars or wherever, they're like, "Oh, man, here's your drink," and I'm like, "Oh, thank you," and I give them, like, some change or whatever, they're like, "Oh, thanks, man, you're the best." I'm like, "Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure." And then I'm
Right.
like, "Why am I saying this with my friends or, like, my family and stuff?" So, it's one of those things that kinda gets ingrained in your brain for a long, long time.
Well, honestly, like if that can be ingrained in your brain, like just politeness,
Yeah.
I think that's a good quality to have forever.
Yeah.
Like for the podcasting world too. So
For sure. Well, now let's talk about execution. You buy the property. What happens next? Where do you guys actually I'll ask Julia, I'll ask you first. Where do you go immediately for your creative ideas? You guys buy the property. What do you start doing? Do you go crazy on Pinterest? Do you start going to all the outlet stores and doing shopping? Like what was your immediate like, all right, this is what I need to go do?
How much time do you have?
I love this. Okay. So I do want to start off by saying the type of property really drove where we were headed with this. So let's say, like, when we first thought about getting a chalet, immediately I envisioned the classic chalet, like the rustic new chalet where it's like a log cabin, but it was newly constructed and had like black rims and it looked like modern rustic. That's what I had envisioned.
Mhm.
But obviously, I didn't realize the price of log homes. Like, I didn't know what that kind of pricing would be, especially in the areas that
Yeah.
we were looking for. So we kind of had to readjust our expectations of what we were looking for. And so, right, I didn't want to be pigeonholed into like thinking like, oh, it has to be modern rustic. Like I said, it would depend on the property that we would find. So we ended up stumbling upon the Happy Camper Chalet, but it was completely like when we found it, it was a wreck. Like just
Mm.
like a whole bunch of cement that was cracked and there was actually a mechanic who previously owned it and we met with him and he was telling us like the projects he had worked on and he said, "You know what? You guys are so lucky. I completely removed all the grass so that we can have space for 20 cars to park here." So he made it all gravel. I was like, "Oh, interesting choice because
Interesting selling
Yeah.
feature.
it's great for a mechanic who wants to fix 20 cars." But I mean, when you're talking about the hospitality industry, I mean, I don't think people want to be hanging out on loads of gravel. So,
Yeah, be like, I think you used the word "we are so lucky" in the wrong
yeah,
scenario right now. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So I was thinking like, what do guests want? And I know like they want to connect with nature. So I know gravel, like kilometers of gravel is not something that guests would be looking for. Yeah, and so one big driving factor was I really was interested in knowing the history of this place. Like I didn't want to come in and say, let's make this a modern chalet and completely ignore, like, let's renovate it and make it completely new. Like I really wanted to maintain the vintage charm of it all. So I did a lot of research to find out where the chalet originated from. And it turns out it was a small hotel back in the early 80s, or late 70s, early 80s. And then when I heard 70s, like my ears lit up because that's my favorite time period ever. So I heard 70s and I said, "Oh my God, we could turn this into like some vintage 70s chalet that transports people back in that time zone." And it's so on my alley because I look up YouTube videos about the 70s just for fun. Like I have this like little niche interest in the 70s. So I said, "Oh my God, there's an opportunity here." And so Frankie is not like a huge fan of the 70s, so I
I'm
think
so tired of disco.
so I think I talked his ear off about like, "Oh my God, did you know like avocado green was the coolest color of the 70s? And did you know like that the type of records that were in at that time?" And he's like, "Yeah, like it's cool, but I mean like not more than that." But I just kept rambling, like my mind went in creative mode. So then I did a lot of research into 70s chalets, 70s getaways, 70s themed, like not even necessarily 70s. I just wanted to feel like
Nostalgic.
nostalgic, like back to the good old days of chalets, like where you would grow up. I wanted it to feel vintage. I wanted people to come in and feel like, oh my God, this is what we used to do when we were younger. Like I want parents to come in and say, oh my God, like those are the records, like the Springsteen record. Like I listened to that with my mom and dad going up north, or like those little details. I really wanted that to convey itself through the chalet. So it became the next couple of months. I think we worked on this for like a solid
We thought
4 months.
initially we're like, oh, let's take 2 week vacation and like
Yeah.
just put two
Yeah.
month and a half later, just it got opened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with, let's say, like the delays in terms of shipping and stuff, it became like a way longer time
Yeah.
frame we were thinking of. But yeah, so it became about looking for specific pieces and specific color schemes and specific, like did want a little bit of a worn out feeling to make it feel like it was a genuine, like you're going into the 70s, not like a modern 70s, but like you're walking into like a real chalet that was preserved in that time, you know? So it became about like finding a record player, going thrifting for vintage records. We don't have any like new records, it's all records from that time specifically. We have like old photos that we found in our specific district, which is called Saint Agathe Mall. We found like these amazing old photos from the 70s, 80s, and even 60s of the travel industry in that specific place. So we got them blown up, put on frames on the walls. We found like really like vintage items. Like it actually became like the finding of these items became part of the intrigue of the whole thing, like the curation and talking with people who were selling us like these old vintage rackets that their parents had up north. And it just became this really fun experience to just look for these pieces. Like I personally enjoyed it. So that's where the concept really came about. And yeah, like even let's say like in terms of our logo, like you could see here on the cup, like you want it to feel like a bit vintage and like I don't know, it just became about curating a vintage space to make people go back to the better days of the getaway, the up north getaway.
Just to give a bit more of a backstory, like we come from like a generation of like Italian immigrants, so like they couldn't really afford to go on like the fancy vacations. So they used to like always kind of like fill up the trunk of their car with like a whole bunch of food and everything and bring their whole families to like little getaways. So that's all they could afford. And they used to bring us like as their grandchildren, my family and even Julia's family. So we kind of wanted to recreate that, like, oh, okay, like it's a family trip where everyone can put everything aside and just enjoy the great outdoors. And like, okay, where do
Mhm.
we start from that? We try to put the technology aside. So
Yeah.
even though like our systems are Bluetooth friendly, you can't really tell that they're Bluetooth friendly. The TV actually turns in, it's a Samsung the frame. So you can't really tell it's a TV unless you try to really turn on the TV. So we always try to give that aspect of like it's family time. So we offer games and things like that. But and when all comes down to like, okay, like it's hard to open up an Airbnb without Wi-Fi or
Right.
yeah, TV for one.
And actually, do want to talk about something you said, Frankie, was about how our grandparents would go up north, specifically to the location we ended up buying in, which I found was so cool.
Bit ironic.
And I'm really close
Yeah.
to my grandparents, so I would look through their old photos to get some inspiration, and I actually found a couple of them were the photos of their trip up north. So I would dissect the photo and I'd say like, "Oh my God, that's so cool." Like they'd have like the rackets there and the way they dressed, and I was just so like it became like it felt like a personal project now. It became like, how do I recreate something that our family went to and that I want people to have that exact experience. So it became like a bit of a selfish creative endeavor, but it seems like people enjoy it. So we get a lot of comments about like, "Oh my God, the attention to detail." And they also talk about like how they too had that experience growing up. Like it's so nice to see that that was translated through like our vision, you know?
All right, Slick Talkers, now for another dynamic sponsored duo of the podcast, Minute and Hostfully. If you haven't heard of Minute, Minute is the #1 noise and occupancy detection device for short-term rental operators just like you. From their outdoor and indoor sensors, you can ensure that with their audio ID technology that you are not getting any false positives for things like wind blowing, plates breaking, dogs barking, doorbells ringing, you name it. You will only get notified when there's an actual potential party happening on site, and that could both be indoor and outdoors, especially as we come up to spring and summer seasons. Not only that, but they have amazing integrations from smart locks and other software partners, of course, like Hostfully. Now, if you don't know about Hostfully, then Hostfully is a property management platform built for short-term rental operators to ensure that they have the best connectivity with channels like Airbnb, Vrbo, and Booking.com. Not only that, but they have the best integration marketplace I've ever seen, so that way operators like you can choose and pick their tech stack without having to force and comply to different operations that just don't make sense for you. Plus, their digital guidebooks are the best in class, and your guests will love them because all the information they need to know about check-in all the way to check-out and the destination are right there at the touch of their fingertips. Check out these special offers from our partners, both Minute and Hostfully, in order to ensure that you are getting the best value with your technology as you continue to operate your business. Back to the episode, and thank you so much for tuning in to Slick Talk. Yeah, the nostalgia, it really sounds like a time, like obviously, like you said, Frankie, the Wi-Fi and the smart locks and like that stuff needs to be there still, but because it's really hard not to do that, especially if you're still working full time. But the nice part about it is you guys really set the tone to slow down, which kind of takes you back to, like you said, Julia, the good old day vibe where it's like that was a period where like, yeah, there was hustle and bustle in it, but not like there is today, where everyone's addicted or on these things and
Mhm.
all their computers and all the work and all the other pieces that go into it. So yeah, it sounds like you guys really just focus on like a slowdown opportunity for travelers or for guests in general, and for yourselves because you get to use it.
Exactly. And actually, it felt more relevant than ever, let's say, quote unquote, coming out of the pandemic or
Mhm.
like getting to a point where people were kind of secluded at home, using technology, always on Zoom, really always on Instagram and TikTok and all these things that it felt even more important, like that quote unquote post pandemic world, like
Yeah,
the idea of going back to the good old days of like disconnecting, like it felt culturally relevant in that way too. It was like we need that as a society and for our generations. It felt like it was some sort of mission to like recreate that for people who just came out of the things that we just went through globally.
mhm. I agree. What made you guys like this is a rare moment for I think a lot of people that get into short-term rentals. You immediately, property number one, have a name for it and a logo. So a lot of people never actually go that way. They just, oh, I'm an Airbnb host, and they just ride the tail of Airbnb. But you've actually created a brand without I may be intentionally doing so, but you guys actually did, which is again really rare, especially from my point of view, just like seeing the people that come into vacation rentals as like, hey, we're gonna create this global or maybe super heavy destination management company. You guys immediately day one as owners have a brand and logo. So what kind of maybe triggered that thought or idea? Would love to know kind of just like the thinking behind that.
I think the major thing that helped us out too was doing a little bit of like research beforehand, but like we look on Airbnb and just kind of like scroll through everything and what kind of properties stuck out the most. We realized that okay, they went for something a little bit that's a bit out there, but like we realized that it's only like 1 in 100. And especially now with like today's generation, anyone can open up a short-term rental. And you can see on Airbnb, like they keep on saying, okay, the supply has become super, super high. However, occupancy is also lower. You're going to hear that all the time. So we thought, okay, we're going to have to find a way that we can not peacock, but like pander to a
Yeah.
specific audience. And of course, the main audience that's going to be kind of like basic, but main audience that goes to chalets are families. And of course, it's families with children. So we thought that maybe putting them in the images would automatically do exactly what you said. Like, oh, hey, we could envision ourselves being there. And of course, we're always going to get the teenagers who also want to go with their friends or like mid 20-year-olds with their friends over to the place just because there's a jacuzzi and spa, which is fine too, by all means. But we were really trying to like recreate the bunk beds for the children. We're trying to recreate like you can run around in the field in front, make a fire with the family. So I think kind of wanted to create a brand and everything so that way people who are looking for that are gonna book our place rather than the place 20 minutes down the road or anything.
Yeah, and I think in terms of, let's say, a logo, I think beyond the fact that it's fun to create and brand things, I think there's an element of like when you're deciding between one place that feels like maybe it's just like an Airbnb that you're putting up and just to make money. And then you see like the other option, which is like a branded place that has like mugs with the logo and has like the welcome basket and is marketed on social media. And then you can add like and the handle is like right there when you walk in. Like I think that puts an extra attention to detail that guests know like, okay, these people are on top of their it's not just like something that you're doing just to
Yeah.
make money. Like this is something that conveys to people that we are serious hosts and that we actually care about the guest experience. And I do think that let's say like having brands, having consistent color schemes, having a vision of what we want guests to experience, I think that's so important because it helps us decide like we spent so much time, my sister's in marketing actually. So we sat
Mhm.
down with her beforehand and we said like we want to create a consistent image. Like we don't want to just put anything out there. Like we want to make sure our logo is consistent with the type of people that come here, which is consistent with the images that we take. So we really got so good at identifying the ideal guest, the image that we wanted, like the kind of feeling we wanted people to have. Feeling was actually really important. Coming from psychology backgrounds, both of us, we really
Mhm.
thought like, what do we want people to feel when they step in? And nostalgia kept coming up, you know? So
Yeah.
we did like a huge marketing practice and figuring out what specifically defining the barriers of which like what happy campers is defined as. And then moving forward, every question became very easy to answer. Like we said, what do we put in the welcome basket? Is it a bottle of wine or is it like old vintage like s'mores kits and like or like
Stuff from the area.
yes,
Yeah.
local things. So when we thought about putting a wine bottle, we said that's not really like happy camper though. Like wine bottle is more like sophisticated and like conveys that you're there with like a group of your friends. Like
Business.
yeah, our business getaways where now that question became so easy to answer because we knew what we stand for and who we are. So we wanted people to gather around the campfire. So we provided the s'mores kits because that's what feels nostalgic and feels like getting away kind of thing, you know? So now
Yeah.
that we have like our clear brand identity, we know moving forward, the questions become so much easier to answer, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes along with what you said too before about like their standards, like in Marriott, they did have standards and consistency across the board.
Yeah.
So hopefully if there's a happy camper 2 or a happy camper
Yeah.
3, we'll know exactly where we're going to be going with everything and maybe even have like a program that, hey, if you come back, we'll give you 10%.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, I was gonna say, because it gives you more independence now away from Airbnb directly. You don't have to be
Mhm.
just tied to the one platform. You can actually build out your own website, which I know you guys have told me you're working on doing and all this other stuff. So now if Happy Camper 2, 3, 4, 100, 120, who knows, comes up, Frankie's like, more work. Um, but those yeah, I was gonna say you guys will have a great retirement, that's for sure. But, the opportunity is there for you to build, knowing that you've already built a brand identity. You don't have to do that or start that process at property number 10. You can actually just get it done right out the gate. So I love that. It gives you that immediate foot ahead of everybody else.
Right, and I think exactly what you said in terms of the direct bookings, like, because we were in a transitionary period coming out of 2021, which was the golden year for short-term rentals, it felt like so much uncertainty, like, we weren't sure where short-term rentals were going, like, I mean, there's always uncertainty, but coming out of the golden year of the short-term rentals, it felt like, "Okay, like, does that mean it's over?" We weren't sure, there was so much uncertainty moving forward that we said, "Look, we can't actually rely on places like Airbnb and Vrbo. Yes, they are like the backbone currently, but like moving forward, we need to develop something that we need to get a social media page. We need to get branding. We need to get consistent customers. We're also working on a newsletter, like those things, so that if ever something happens with Airbnb or so many different sites that you can be on, like we know that we're self-sustaining in that way. So it gives us kind of like a little cushion to fall back on. Like we're a short-term rental. We're not an Airbnb destination, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Well, and I was gonna say the cool part with all of this is that I wouldn't say you're not like riding the coattails, but like you just said, the independence, the backbone. It's good to have those platforms and to be optimized. And like I went through your guys' listing just before the recording today on Airbnb. It's like you're hitting the great description, you're hitting the great lifestyle photos, you're hitting all the amenity boxes, you're doing all the pieces. All your reviews are 5 stars. You're communicating and commenting on the reviews. That's super important. And as you're building this brand and as you're continuing to move forward into like, the examples of more properties, you know, these, I guess, like you said, Julia, the golden years is no longer the golden year anymore. So for people to even if you are on the platform, like you can stay on just Airbnb, but the operators that stay on Airbnb and don't do above and beyond like you guys are with the brand and the logo and the mugs and all the other attention to detail pieces, they're not going to do good. They're going to be the ones that are saying, "Oh, Airbnb is a bust. There's not enough bookings." But, it takes serious operators now. It's no longer like the side hustle when I got in 2018 of being like, "Oh yeah, I could just, throw up a place on Airbnb and call it a day." It's no longer in that wheelhouse. So, yeah, you guys are already like 10 steps ahead.
Right. So, I mean, let's say like building the website and newsletters, like this is, let's say, a year's worth of plan. But I mean, it is like that we've always entered into this from day one, knowing that that was our intention. Like we weren't here to say, let's just put something up on Airbnb and hope it
Yeah.
works for the next decade and then retire. We're not retiring in 10 years, but I mean,
Yeah. Other than this economy.
uh, just to say like that's not our intention. Again, it was always to provide the guest experience and with the intention of always being self-sustaining and being a brand that holds with or without Airbnb and with or without whatever is the trend currently, you know?
Well, I want to ask this one final question before we get into the part that I told you guys about that we're trying out for 2023. What was the either most surprising thing that you've realized through being a short-term rental host, or the least surprising thing that you thought was gonna be a big shock but wasn't? I would love to know one from each of you.
So, well, okay, two things I have to say, but the first one being Frankie and I could almost withstand anything moving forward because we've been through hard things in the past, but I don't think anything compared to ripping out concrete, lots of concrete, and like putting grass. And our relationship had undergone like 2 months of intense potential arguments
Stress.
that could have potentially like broke us up. I think we broke up like 5 times and got back together. Like so it's this relationship was tested that now I feel like, nothing can really come between us at this point. Like it's just
Is that your most surprising or
no,
least
but I
surprising?
do want to say that moving forward, like if your listeners are a couple or even just friends, like you have to go into this really being realistic and saying like this is not going to be easy. It's not something that like, oh yeah, we just buy the couches and we put it up. Like this is like really constantly tests us. And now we've gotten into the groove, like a really comfortable groove, but we have to always like we're always shooting things back and forth. And so that was a huge test to the relationship. So I just want to say that for your listeners.
Yeah.
But personally, I find, let's say, like the biggest
I
shock
I
that,
have mine, the most surprising.
well, okay, wait, I'll finish mine and then you want to say yours?
Okay, sorry, go on.
So the biggest shock is that I found, like, I went into it hearing like horror stories about the short term rental world, like thinking, like, oh, people are going to trash your place or people are going to be so rude or people are going to like leave their cigarette butts everywhere or start a fire. So we would, even before we started opening it up, we were like, oh my God, losing sleep over it, thinking like, oh my God, someone's going to start a fire. Someone's going to ruin the hot tub. We're going to be like tens of thousands in debt. And like, this is going to be such a disaster. So we really prepped ourselves for that. But I think the biggest lesson I learned is that actually, like, I'd say like 95 even to 99%, like they're such nice people. Like it's a really nice lesson in humanity that we've learned is that we're always shocked. Like people were like, oh no, like so, a small thing went wrong. They're gonna leave us a 2-star review, and people leave us this outstanding review. And we're like, oh, what? That's so nice. Or
Yeah.
like people left us tip, people left us bread from their country that they made. Like people are so sweet. And we were genuinely shocked because we had heard such horror stories. And it's actually so comforting, I guess, people going into the short-term rental space that people are actually nice and people for the
Mhm.
majority of the part want to have a nice experience. And if you're just nice back, like they're just, it's so refreshing to see that. And I'm like, you know what? Actually, people are very sweet and we can't actually complain about that.
I'm actually praying right now that she didn't jinx us.
Yeah. But
Or
what's yours? Tell us
mine was
yours.
actually that. I wanted to get ahead of that. Yeah. So the most shocking and surprising thing that I think I have was like everyone has been super, super nice. I don't know if the problem is with me or with us, but like we just thought that there's gonna be like an insurance claim every other week. People were gonna
Yeah.
like the place was gonna be wrecked. I think it just happened once, but like they just had a good time, and it's people are gonna be people
Yeah.
sometimes. Other than that, it's been just really, really nice.
Yeah, like we're
Yeah. No, I
actually
agree.
eating it. We're like sometimes we used to be critical going to like Airbnbs. We'd be like, oh, like the sheets weren't folded. We would never write a bad review, but we would kind of talk between us. But like then people are really nice to us. We're like, oh my god, are we? Is there something wrong with us? Like were we being too critical? Like people are genuinely so nice, so sweet.
Yeah, it's a good surprise, and it's funny because like, the big scary things like the insurance claims and all the safety stuff is real. Like, trust me, there's a ton of that happening, but those are the main stories that make the headlines. So,
Okay. Yeah.
obviously, like, if everyone praised or put a headline in all the good stuff, our news would be covered with positivity, and,
Mhm.
sometimes that just doesn't that's not how the world wants to work sometimes. So,
Yeah.
obviously, the bad things are the ones that get in front of you, but
Yeah, I do think also though, like, I don't wanna make it seem like it's all roses because I
oh,
think
no.
because because
No.
at the end of the day, like, we do offer, like, a huge, like, guest experience that let's say, like, maybe they are more willing to forgive, let's say, something going wrong because we're so immediate to answer, or we provide them with so many amenities that maybe they're like, "Okay, like, who cares if, like, the Wi-Fi was glitchy for, like, a couple minutes," or something like that, you know? Like, I think it's not to say like, okay, the short-term rental space is so easy, like everyone's so nice. I think it's a two-way street. I think people have to be great hosts. And then when you're a great host, I think like the guests are just genuinely happy. Like how we get so many comments about like they're shocked at how great of an experience it is. And we're like, oh, okay, we were worried that we weren't offering enough. And we're like, no,
Yeah.
seriously, like we're coming back, we're bringing the whole family, like we're telling our friends, like it's so refreshing to hear that. So
I get jealous of their stays.
yeah,
I'm just like, oh, I want to be up north right now so bad with them. And I was like, it seems like they're having such a great time.
yeah.
I wish I was there.
Do you find, let's say, Will, do you find that do you see the same thing that we see that people are genuinely like pleasant and nice people?
Yeah, people are very understanding, and at the end of the day, like you said, I think when you come at it with the hospitality mindset of like, "I wanna take care of this," obviously, they're here on a vacation. We had, a guest recently at one of our Florida properties that we manage, last minute booking, booked, like, a day before arriving, and she was like, "Hey, me and the husband really need to get away. We've had a really hard end of 2022, really hard beginning of 2023. We just need a time to relax, and this property looks perfect. We're so excited." And I'm messaging with the guests and just saying, "We're happy to host you, looking forward to it. If you need anything, here's your guidebook. Reach out to us," the whole message. Well, their check-in experience wasn't that great. We had a deadlock. We had, one of our housekeepers didn't inform us that the smoke alarm batteries need to be
Oh,
replaced, so there's the chirping. So, like little things, nothing crazy to ruin a vacation, but still, when you enter a vacation that you're really much looking forward to, it's not the best experience, especially with the lock being dead and having to communicate where the hide a key is so that way she can get in and do the manual lock and all that stuff. So
mhm.
being able to then immediately send somebody to fix the alarm, to immediately send somebody to fix the door, to immediately give them a credit towards Disney because it's in Florida. So we gave them a credit towards one of our favorite restaurants and just said, "Hey, dinner's on us. Please go enjoy it while we get this fixed. We'll make sure that everything's ready for you. The pool heater is on, all the other stuff, kind of like all the little pieces of attention." And that could have easily, if we didn't respond to that appropriately, could have left us a 3 to 4 star review because the check-in process is so important. So that being said, like you said, Julia, the more you just do things for your guests, the more likely they're going to be able to forgive and just put that in the past. Like the review never even mentioned the door lock or the smoking alarm. It wasn't a private note saying thanks for fixing it, but like the review publicly never had anything. It was great stay, great home, great company. Would love to come back. Like that's
Yeah.
the type of experience you want to leave.
And do you have, let's say, like when you receive the notification saying like so and so left you a review and you didn't review them back, does your heart skip a beat when like
Oh
let's say
yeah.
the it didn't go well?
Oh
You're
yeah.
like, oh no, this is the one star that's gonna knock it
Oh
out.
yeah.
We get that
Yeah.
all the time. We're like, I'm holding on to him. He's holding on to me. He's like,
You see the
well,
end of
so and so
it.
left the review. We're like, this is it. Like it's over.
We're
And then we're
going
like,
down in flames.
yeah, we're like a 5 star, and like a couple things went wrong. Like we're shocked, but like you were saying, it has a lot to do with like how you respond. Like
Mm.
it could easily have been, let's say, like there was a glitch with the hot tub, and we didn't answer for hours or even days, or we didn't answer at all, or we said like sorry, too bad kind of thing. Like then that I could see leading to a bad
Yeah.
review. But I think people just want some sort of recognition. Like I think people just need to be seen. Like
Yeah.
that sucks, and we
I
acknowledge
think
that.
I think what happens too, it's the way that you respond to it. Like, oh, we had an issue that we redid our bathtub, and then our bathtub, after a certain amount of time, there was a default with the paint and the chemical that we used. And that happened while the guest was staying there. And like we had no idea that this was happening. So the guy was just like, oh, hey, there's a crack. And then we apologized right away. We're just like, oh my God, we're so sorry. We didn't know this was happening. We're gonna take care of it immediately. And the guy wrote us back, super, super nice. He's just like, look, I'm really impressed with the way that you guys actually handled it. Thank you so much. We offered him a small credit as well, or a lunch. We offered him a lunch. And the next week we replaced everything. We put in a new bath, we put in everything, and the show continues. But
Yeah.
because we responded so fast and he was so impressed, that also plays a lot into guest experience, which I'm sure even working in the hotel industry, you can see like, oh, if you respond in such a great way, your ranking's even gonna be higher on their list afterwards.
Yeah, because let's say like when we would stay at a hotel, there were so many situations in which, let's say, like something would go wrong. But when you bring it up to the staff, if their response is like, well, it kind of is what it is, then it's like I'm kind of tense the rest of the trip. And or at least for that, a couple hours later, we're talking, we're like, oh, I can't believe how they responded. But if they're like, oh yeah, we'll upgrade you or we'll give you a bottle of wine or whatever they
My
offer.
pleasure.
Yeah, then we're
Yeah.
like, "Oh
I've-
my god," like, we want something to go wrong more often, Like, it
yeah.
feels a treat that something went wrong because their redemption or their comeback is so, like, on top of their game that it's actually, like, more impressive that sometimes I forget where, I think I was reading a book about hospitality. They were saying, like, sometimes it's better something goes wrong and you show them how you can redeem yourself, and that redemption actually is better than if nothing went wrong because people see that there's a human element to someone going above and beyond and acknowledging that you're in a situation that's unpleasant. Like I think about that, and I think about how many times we've been in that, let's say like in an airplane and the light at the top didn't work, so we couldn't read at night. And they offered us like these mini bottle of wines, and we're like, yeah, we didn't even want to read, but I mean, thank you so much. So the redemption that they like the extra mile that they go actually is better than if the light just worked the whole time?
Totally agree. I was gonna say the recovery process is really important, but it's crazy because Julia, you just said earlier, people will tell you something without really telling you. So I can use our
Mhm.
guest for example. She said her and the husband were having a really hard end of the year, beginning of the year, and doesn't need to say anything, but like that slight mention puts that light bulb in your head. This experience that they're going through does not help that. It actually makes
Right.
it worse, even because they've been anticipating it for however long. So, like you said, being able to recover instantly, being able to do the messaging, communicate, get the team on site, fix the issues, give them a distraction, which again, like I hate saying it, it's not like you're intentionally manipulating, but giving them a way to get off the property, go to dinner, go to lunch, have time away, completely paid for, allows you to then do all the chaos behind the scenes instead of them watching it and being more stressed and tense and all the little stuff. So
Exactly.
yeah, just like a little mention of, hey, we're having a hard time and want to get away can just be that little seed that helps you be able to recover 10 times better than if they're like, oh, we're
Yeah.
just here to go out for no reason, you know?
And then also, like, I think, like, woven into what everything that you're saying is like that human element. Like we were talking about how many times we stayed at Airbnbs and we forgot that someone like a person this is someone's house. Like it just felt so like sterile and like there was no human element. Like we didn't realize that we were talking to a human person who owned this property and who was curating an experience for us. So I think reminding people, like calling them by their names and showing like that you're just a human owning like a small business, like operating a small business. It's not like we're not trying to make it like too hotel like where it's like the human is kind of erased. Like we're actually trying to make it more obvious that we are like we're hosting with passion and heart and things like that. And actually, like, I know we have to go just quickly though. On social media, I think for your guests, for your listeners, I think it'd be really helpful because one thing that we do, and I found it to be super successful, is we do weave into our social media the human element. Like we're not just showing like photos of the
Yeah.
property, like we said before, like we're putting like people in it, but also the process of putting together the cabin was really involved. Like it was a process that we involved our family in a lot.
Mhm.
And there's one video. So my grandfather is a tailor. He's been a tailor for I think almost 70, 80 years now. So we had to get curtains and he actually ended up tailoring all the curtains in the chalet, which comes out to about 14 curtains. So he
Wow.
was at this for like days, like measuring, like arguing back and forth with my grandmother about the best way to do this. So I happened to record the process just for my own personal interest. Like I was thinking like no one really cares about my grandfather sewing curtains. But then when I was looking back at the videos, I said, you know what, this could be an interesting reel. Let me put it up, thinking like a couple hundred people are gonna see it. And so I made a whole story about it being like him sewing. He's been a tailor for 80 years. Like he's tailoring the curtains for a chalet. Like it adds the human element again that we were speaking about. And I could not even tell you that the success of this reel, it brought in almost 300,000 viewers
To date.
to
Wow.
date. And
Wow.
the comments just keep going. And you know what the beauty is that people are saying like, it's so nice that you're involving like the elderly and people are saying, oh, the art of sewing is dead. And it's so nice that you're trying to bring that into your cabin. And we've gotten a couple of bookings off of this reel. And so I was thinking like, why is this such a hit? And I remembered that it actually, we're not trying to erase the human element of short-term rentals. We're actually trying to make it seem like we're trying to make people realize that, you know, operating a short-term rental is like you're hiring cleaners, you're hiring like people who have businesses that you're helping sustain their own businesses. You're helping like a grandfather connect to their granddaughter. Like there's so many
Mhm.
elements that come into like just having a short-term rental. And I think it was like it just made me realize how there's like such like it's so important to emphasize that we're humans operating a chalet. We're not like this robotic place that's just like automating everything, you know?
And it's not just us, it's like the
Sure.
whole town who's helping build it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I told you guys a little bit about a new thing that we're doing on the show, and I have two guests that were on before you, and they have a question for you, and then I'm going to ask you to ask a question for the guests after you without telling you who they are. So, the guests before you were Adam and Daniel, the founders of Host Financial, where they help property managers or Airbnb short-term rental hosts buy properties for either their portfolio, their first property, whatever it is. The first question, so Julia, this is going to be for you. This is from Adam. Says, what would you do differently if you could go back 10 years exactly to this date?
Wow, 10 years? I love this question actually. Um, you know, I don't even have that many like regrets in my life. I feel like I lived
Doesn't
my
have to be a
20s.
regret. You could
But yeah,
relive. You could relive a good moment. You could go back and say something or whatever, anything.
okay, so one of the best experiences in our lives was we moved to Australia for almost 2 years. So I feel like I was a little not late in the game, but I mean like we were what, 25, 26. I think I would have done another experience like that earlier on. I feel
Mhm.
like I would have maybe liked to have lived my 20s a little more. Yeah, like I would have liked to seen different places, but like I love traveling, like slow traveling. Like I don't want to just go like for a couple of weeks. Like I love the fact that we were there for 2 years. We like integrated, we had a community, we knew where to go and the best places to go. Like that felt like I feel like it's a sense of home. So I would love to have that experience elsewhere. I I still want to do that in my 30s, but it would be nice to have done that a little earlier because I was so scared to take that leap, thinking like, "Oh my god, like what if things go wrong?" But in the end, it actually was a beautiful experience for both of us, and I think I would have liked to do that again.
I like it. That's a really good one.
Good
Yeah.
What
answer
about
there.
you, Frankie? Actually, not what about you? I have a different question for you. Sorry, I totally forgot. There's two questions for this one. So this one's from Daniel from Host Financial. He goes, "What would you rather have? $100 million today, or you go back to your old self at 6 years old, knowing everything you know today, and starting completely over at 6?"
Oh.
Thank you very much for the question, Daniel. You know, I like, I'm always a sucker for the underdog.
Mm,
So I might have to go with the second part. I'd go back to being 6 and go back knowing exactly what I know today. Reason being is because I feel like if someone just gives you like the money, I believe like, oh, okay, like I might be able to make like decisions and everything. However,
mm.
I still kind of want to relive everything that I did now and still have like that slow burn and go through everything.
So then you would
There's,
be opening a short-term rental at the age of 7 then, at
yeah,
that age.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I love.
That's, yeah, because the bank will give
Yeah,
me everything I
like,
wanted.
"Mom, Dad, sign this. I'm ready to go." So, you
Exactly.
Yeah.
gotta
I love these questions. I love this format.
Although
no,
100
it's
million,
always fun. Yeah, I was gonna say 100 million. I don't know. I was like, even at 6 years old, if I knew everything I knew today, I still wasn't the brightest kid, you know? So I probably
It's
should
not
just
enough. It's not enough time. It's true.
it's an interesting sandbox stories.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, now without knowing who's gonna be on the show after you 2, I'll give you one opportunity to ask. It's gonna be one person, it won't be a duo. So, to ask one question to this one guest, no understanding of who they are, what they do, until their episode.
Okay. What's your ick? So what's that thing that you really like that gets under your skin that
Grinds your gears, and it's a deal breaker.
whether it be dating or whether it be like just
Friendship,
anything, work, anything.
grandparents.
Mm, family. Yeah.
Yeah, like,
Can we ask you what's your ick or is that for next
Oh,
episode?
I'm all in. I'm trying to think of an ick. My biggest, I'll say, is maybe not an ick, but it's a big pet peeve. I hate tardiness. I hate lateness. I hate the lack of like responsive when it comes to people's time, if that makes sense. So there's a schedule
Mhm.
or a time to meet up or anything like that. Like my friends know this, and so they'll intentionally be minutes, just a couple minutes late, and
Uh,
just try to really rev me up because I'll show up like, "Where have you guys been?" But yeah,
yeah.
I'm very much like it's an ick. It's a I don't know. It kind of, especially in relationships, to me, it's like I get things happen, car breaks down, tire goes flat, phone battery dies, whatever, you can't figure out how to get to a certain place. I understand. That happens. But I feel like sometimes it can be a huge, like, disrespect of someone when you just are showing up late and not being on time or not being prepared or whatever. It's like, yeah, that would be my ick, if that can count as an ick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, for me, I think it would be like along the lines of canceling, same idea with like that kind of
Last
disrespect for
minute.
one's time. Obviously things happen, but it's like when we start to see it's like a consistent behavior, I could see how that's annoying.
that's true. Like if she gets a text message 30 minutes before we're leaving, and like it's just like, oh yeah, tonight's
No.
not
Yeah.
good. Like she's raging.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
because the thing is, I want to cancel too. Okay, I want to cancel, but I show up even when I'm not like 100%, but I'm showing up
Yeah.
because I have that like that sense of like
You're like, "I committed."
Like
I committed.
y-
It's in the
Yeah.
agenda. It's happening. Okay.
Yeah, I'm very much a, calendar ritual person, so I'm like, "It's in my calendar, I'm not missing it unless this person cancels or gets hit by a bus." Like,
Right.
I'm not gonna be the one to cancel it, so, yeah,
Yeah,
it's,
excuse
100%.
matters. Like I need a good excuse. I can't get like one of those like, you know what? It's not really like those
Mhm.
like I don't know.
and
I don't.
fact check it. Your car's
Yeah.
broken. All
Yeah.
right.
Show me the
Yeah.
evidence.
Show me the invoice.
Post it on your Instagram story so I know it's real. It's like
Exactly. We're not neurotic, I promise. I promise.
No, I know you're not. You're good. Well, this has been so much fun, and I really love getting to know your guys' story, and I love seeing, the ideas that you have when it came to your chalet and to your guys' relationship and how this has all impacted you guys. So, just want to say thank you for being on the show, and thanks for your question for the next guest. This is going to be a fun one. So, if you had one link to send anybody who's listening right now to learn more about you two or about the chalet or anything in the world, what would that link be to share with them in the show notes?
I would say go to our Instagram.
Instagram.
Yeah.
Instagram will lead you to our pretty much the whole vessel. Like you'll be able to find our link on Airbnb. you'll be able to see everything that we discussed in this podcast as well. So the lovely photos, you get to see Julia's grandfather, Nando the tailor, get to see more of these fabulous mugs everywhere.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
No, it's so
And
good.
well, thank you so, so much for all the work you do. Honestly, like we love podcasts like this. And if it wasn't for podcasts like this, we wouldn't even know what to do. Honestly, it's really meaningful in the short-term rental space. So thank you so much for having content like this. And you're just really fun to talk to too. Good to know we share a similar. Yeah.
Yes, no, it's been so much fun, and I appreciate you guys with all the kind words. Yeah, no, this is I love that this is what I get to say I do for a living. So it's a very much a blessing. So my parents still don't get it, but at the end of the day, they don't need to, you know. But all of you Slick Talkers that are watching the live or listening to the audio, make sure you check out everything Happy Camper Chalet. Give them a like, subscribe, a follow, a comment, a message, a DM, all the above. Check everything out, and we'll see you all again next week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.